Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Tzadik Beis in as we learn for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael and soon about Tzara v'Shivya. May our soldiers be matzliach. May everybody come back healthy, safe and sound. Says the Mishnah. This is the beginning of the 6th parak, and today we're going to have a real what we call Yesoda Stikadaf, talking about real issues. We'll get into it right away. Says the Mishnah. You sell fruits. Now, fruits doesn't just mean apples and peaches. Fruits mean any kind of produce. Sometimes these fruits are eaten. Sometimes they're planted. There are many seeds, many kinds of fruits and seeds, vegetables, whatever you want to call them, all kinds of things like that you can either eat or you can plant them in the ground and grow again. Now, here a man sold somebody fruits and bizarre, and the purchaser planted them. That was his intention of planting them, and they didn't grow. It was a bum crop. He sold them bad seeds. Below samchu, they didn't grow. Even if he sold them flaxseed normally is not eaten. People don't like that so much. It's usually planted. It's usually planted in the ground to grow more flax. But some people like to eat it. Some people eat it. So he says over here, if you sell perusim, there was a mocher, a buyer and a seller. The seller sold him seeds. And again, what's the problem that we've had throughout this whole Masechta? They didn't specify what they're for. If he says these are seeds for planting, fine. These are seeds for eating, fine. He sold them the seeds. Some people plant these seeds. Some people eat these seeds. What happened? And they didn't grow. And even if it's seeds which are normally, most of the people plant these seeds. Most people buy flax seeds, don't eat them. They plant them. Eino chayev, the seller is not responsible. Why? Because he could say, Eino chayev is not responsible for the loss involved. He says, yeah, but they didn't grow anything. Oh, I thought you meant to eat them. You planted them in the ground? They weren't so good for planting. You should have eaten them. But I bought them for planting. Well, you didn't say so. What's the rule when it comes to buying and selling? Hamotzi mechavero olavaraya. You want the seller to pay for it? Prove to me, you should have said something at the time that I sold it to you that you were going to plant them. I thought you were going to eat them. Shmuel says, and we'll see, probably the Tanakhama agrees with this as well. So let's say it's garden seeds. Seeds in a garden, kinds of seeds that nobody eats these. Nobody eats these kind of seeds. Everybody plants these seeds. If it's seeds that everybody plants, they're not eaten at all, then the seller is responsible. If you plant them, they didn't grow, then the seller is responsible. But otherwise, the seller could say, now, the seller could say, I thought you were buying them to eat. This question comes up many places in Shas. And we're going to see this Mishnah goes like Shmuel, a famous thing we had in Bava Kama. Rav says, you go bust the robe. Torah says, right? We know you always go bust the robe. There's a robe in the Sanhedrin. We're going to talk next in Masechta, right? 2-1, 12 to 10, or 13 to 10 in a Sanhedrin, a big Sanhedrin. You go bust a robe. If you find pieces of meat in the street, and there's 9 kosher butchers and 1 non-kosher butcher, and you found it in the street, right? You didn't go into a store, you found the street, you go bust a robe, you can eat it. Most people today wouldn't eat it, right? Unless it's got a plumber on it or something, a sticker, a chayashra. But the halacha is you can eat it. Even if you mixed up a piece of non-kosher meat with 2 pieces of kosher meat, technically, minat Torah, you go bust a robe, 2-1, you could eat the whole thing. Except the rabbi said, batal b'shishim, other rules, etc., they made more stringencies. You go bust a robe. So you always go bust a robe. What's the issue over here? That's what Gemara is going to talk about. They go bust a robe. You go bust a robe. Most people buy these seeds to plant them. Very few people buy them to eat them. So why didn't you just go to the robe? Why do you say that the seller could say, I thought you meant to eat them? I thought you were buying to eat. Why don't you go bust a robe? So, the Mishnah goes like Shmuel, who says, Ein hochem mamanach robe. Robe when it comes to Isser. When it comes to a question like meat, is the meat kosher or not? You have 9 kosher stores, 1 non-kosher store, you go bust a robe. Technically, even 2-1, you can go bust a robe. When it comes to Isser, not when it comes to money. When it comes to money, everybody can say, listen, I didn't mean to buy. I meant to buy it for seeds. I didn't know that you meant to buy, that you were selling it for food. So that's Shmuel's opinion. Ein hochem mamanach robe. Yes, we go bust a robe when it comes to Isser, but not when it comes to money. Rav disagrees. Rav and Shmuel, they were colleagues. They always they disagreed. Many times they said the same thing. But Rav says no, you go basaro. Rav wouldn't agree with this Mishnah. He'll find there's another. Rav can argue himself, but we'll see this tomorrow. We'll see that there's a Tana who argues with this Mishnah and says no. You look at the Rov. If most people buy it for seed, then the purchaser can say I bought it for seed. I didn't buy it for food. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. So basically, our Mishnah we're telling you now goes like Shmuel, who says Amotzi mechavel v'ra. When it comes to money, Amotzi mechavel, don't go basaro. Prove to me that you sold it to me for food. I didn't say anything about food. I meant to buy it for seed, and therefore, since they were bad seeds, you owe me the money. How much does he own? Does he own for the toil of the work also in the field, that he tilled, he had to have a garden and all that? That we'll see tomorrow as a machlokas about that. Okay, says the Gemara. Itmar. Now we're going to see similar cases, and we're going to try to apply them to the Mishnah or to the Machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Here we see the first Mishnah, the Machlokas. The Gemara is running down this Machlokas from Rav Kama, Rav and Shmuel. Itmar. I sold you an ox. The seller sold an ox to the buyer. But it turned out that the ox previous to the sale was a gorer, an animal that gores on him. It's a wild animal, and therefore it's not fit for plowing. What do you do when you have an animal that's not so fit for plowing and it's not going to last very long? It's going to get into fight. You shecht it. That's what they did. They had an old, what did they do in a little town in Europe when they had an old ox or whatever, a goat that was about to die? So they shechted it. They can at least get some food out of it. It wasn't going to, otherwise it would have died and they would have lost the whole thing, right? So he says in a case like this, you sold the shore. Okay, again, let's say you have a mocher and a buyer, a seller and a buyer. And the seller sold him an ox, and it turns out that it was a goren ox. Now, the buyer says, I wanted it for plowing. It's no good. It's a mekachtos. Rav Amar is a mekachtos. Bad deal. Deal's off. It's a mistake. Because I wanted it for plowing. You're telling me, what's the seller arguing? I thought you were going to eat it. I know that the ox is a goren ox. Shecht it, and you'll have a good steak. What's your problem? Shmuel Amar Yachalom Elo. He could say, no, l'shchita machartev l'cha. Right? He could say, again, Shmuel says, he could say to him, listen, I sold it to you for shchita. The mocher is not responsible. Like we saw in our Mishnah. What did our Mishnah say? When he sold him seed, and the seed may be eaten or may be planted. The buyer says, I wanted it for planting. The seller says, no, I thought you were going to eat it. It would have been good seed. Same thing over here. Shmuel says, the seller could say, I thought you were going to shecht it. What's your problem? So it's a goring animal. Why? You're going to shecht it. He says, and therefore, the seller is not responsible. I sold you a goring ox. Too bad. You should have shechted it. That's what I sold it for. Says the Gemara, presumably these people knew one another, right? They sold him an ox. These two guys, Reuben and Shimon, they knew each other. So why don't you see? Is the purchaser a farmer who needs it for plowing, or is he a butcher? Why don't you see what he needed it for? Obviously, what is the seller telling him? The seller saying, I thought you were buying it for shechting, right? I thought you were going to shecht it. What's your problem? You have a goring ox. I thought you were buying for shechting. So wait a minute. How can he argue that if the man was a farmer, not a butcher? If the man was a farmer and he knew one another, Rashbam says, the first of the widest lines in the Rashbam, that is a filu l'shmuel lavi mekachtos. The kivin shemakirin says, since they know one another. So I know if you sell a man that has a farm and he's plowing and he needs oxen to plow, and he goes and he buys an ox. Obviously, he bought the ox for plowing. He's not a butcher. Pardon? So that's the point over here. That's exactly the machlokas. Rav says it's a mekachtos because I don't have to tell you. Most people buy oxen, buy them for plowing. Mekachtos, it's a mistake. I want my money back. The Rashbam explains the Rashbam says mekachtos. Even the it's like wine. It's like I bought wine and I got vinegar. The whole thing's a mistake. In other words, I wanted it for plowing, and he didn't. In other words, even if you didn't tell him, that's what he wanted. Most people buy it for plowing. I'm a farmer, and that's Rav's argument. So therefore, it's a mistake, and he gets his money back. Shmuel says no. He could say, I sold it to you for shechting. What's your problem? So the Gemara says, why don't you see if it's a person who buys for slaughtering igav or dezav and if he bought it for slaughtering for shchita. So obviously he bought it for shchita, and then the buyer can't have any claim that an ox is a goring ox. But if he bought it for plowing, if he's a farmer, obviously he bought it for farming. How can you say that the seller can tell him, well, I thought you wanted it for this? If he's a farmer, obviously he bought it for plowing, and therefore he should get his money back like Rav. The answer is the Megavadas of Nachah. Speaking about, you're right. That would be true. And if he's only a farmer, and the guy knew that he's a farmer, obviously it would be even Shmuel would agree that it's a mektos. But here speaking about a farmer who also has a butcher. He's a big businessman. He's got a farm, and he also shechts there. He's also got a little butchery on the side. He says he could have bought it for both. So you can't tell from the fact that is the buyer a farmer or is he a butcher? Maybe he's both. If he's both, and a chanami. If he wouldn't be both, if he was a butcher, you can't claim afterwards, well, the animal is a goring ox. So what? You've shecht the animal and you eat the meat. So wait a minute. A plowing ox costs a lot more than a ox that's about to be slaughtered, right? Usually the ox that's going to be slaughtered isn't worth as much, right? He's going to die now. You're going to eat the meat. It's going to be gone. The plowing ox can last for years. So why don't you see how much he paid him? So see if he paid him, if he paid the value of a plowing ox, then it's a mistake. That's a mekachtos. And Shmuel should also agree that that the seller can't fend him off. If he bought it for plowing, he bought it for plowing, and you can tell from what he paid for. So let's read it. The Iker Bisser will come to the right there. The value of the meat went up in value. In other words, meat, like here before Yontif, the prices on the butchers always go up, right? There's a demand for meat. So the price of the meat went up, and it's the same as that of a plow. In other words, a goring ox, whether the ox was going to be rather slaughtered or the ox was going to be plowed, has the same price. So you can't tell from that. So wait a minute. If you can't tell from that, what's the difference? If I bought an ox and I wanted it for plowing, and the ox is a goring ox, so therefore he can't use for plowing. He's got to be shechted. But they have the same value. They both cost $20. So what's the difference? Either way, I got a $20 ox. I could sell it, right? If it's not good for plowing, I could still get my money back. What differences are going to come out if they cost the same amount of money? Do I have to be mashriach? I bought the animal for plowing. Now it turns out it's a goring ox, so therefore it can only be used for shechita. Yeah, but I'm not a shochet. I got to go, I got to go sell it and get somebody to hire somebody to slaughter it. I don't want to be bothered with that. So the Gemara says, okay. Rav says, so again, Rav says, just like we see in our Mishnah, not like Rav, our Mishnah said that the seller could say, I thought you bought it for food. And the same thing over here, I thought you bought it for shechita. So our Mishnah says he could do that. Rav over here in the Gemara, when it comes to the animal, says no, it's a mekachtos. He can't say that. So Rav doesn't go like our Mishnah. Our Mishnah goes like Shmuel. So the Gemara says, according to Rav, that it says it's a mekachtos. What's the case? Right? So what? He's claiming, I want my money back, right? I want my money back. I bought this ox for plowing, and it's only and it's a goring ox, so I can't use it, right? So what's his claim? What's his claim? He says, well, he's giving him back the ox. If the seller no longer has the money, he doesn't have what they're paying for. So like of tur bezuzeh, he should hold back the ox until he gets his money back. I mean, should people say, min mari to reshusech, the one who is the master of your money, meaning the one who borrowed money from you, that you owe money to him, pari ifra, take even brand. In other words, if a guy owes you money, he doesn't have any cash, take whatever you can get. So over here too, if the seller cannot reimburse him now because he doesn't have the money, so hold on to the animal. What do you mean in the mekachtos and you give back the animal? So let's read it. The ikalish lamei. He has money to pay him back. Rav says, raise the mekachtos. Why? Basarubas linan. You go basarov, aruba l'radyazavi. Most animals, most oxen are sold for plowing, not for shechita. So Rav says, you go basarov. He sold them the guy sold them an ox, and most of them most oxen in the world are used for plowing, and therefore, since this animal is not fit for plowing because it's a wild animal, deals off. It's a mekachtos. It's like I sold you wine and I gave you vinegar. It's a bad deal. I sold you the wrong thing. Shmuel Amar, Shmuel say, but where do you go? Basaro be isura. When it comes to isurim, like we said, eating the wrong food, right? You go basar isur or bezin or whatever. But mamona love, not when it comes to money. Why? Because for money, you can say, listen, I bought it for this. What do you mean basaro? Rove tells you what most of the world does. But I bought this animal. I bought the seed for plowing. I bought this animal for plowing. So there you don't say that. And we talk a paskin Like we paskin like Rav when it comes to Isser, we paskin like Shmuel when it comes to money in general. And over here, when it comes to money matters, ain't hochem mammon acharov. Here the Gemara says, but mamon lo. But in Baba Kama, we had that famous lashon. Every kid who learned Baba Kama knows, ain't hochem mammon acharov. That's Shmuel's sheet, and that's how we hold. Now, there are many sfekas that we're going to get into that the Gemara talks about elsewhere. And the Gemara says, I'm reading from the Rashbam on Amar Aleph before we turn to Amid Beis. And Rashbam says over there, Sumchas, Rashbam, we had this before, that Rashbam paskins like Sumchas, even though Mama and Mutah suffix Cholkin, something that's in a suffix, right? You don't know, you split it. Now, we don't necessarily paskin like Rashbam. Rashbam paskin like Sumchas. We say Sumchas goes like Rav Meir, and that's a Shitas Yachid, Mama and Mutah suffix Cholkin. But there are cases where they agree, for example, that you go, and he gives a famous example. Rashbam brings down a famous example from Yevamos. Let's just turn to Yevamos. These questions are very interesting. For example, Reuven is married to Leah, right, in Yevamos. And he dies, right? He dies, but his wife remarried, right? His wife remarried. There were apparently no children, and she remarried within 3 months. She remarried within 3 months, and there was a child. There was a child. Now, what do you say over here? She married within 3 months, and the question over here is, whose child is it? Whose child is it? If it belonged to the deceased husband, right? So there is no yibum over here. There's not, right? There's no yibum. She married somebody else from the shuk. Okay, she married somebody else from the shuk. If at the time they thought that the husband left nobody heirs, and let's assume even better. Let's assume there was no brothers. Okay, what happened over here? There was no brothers. And the question is, whose son, whose kid that was? Now the kid grew up, and the kid had money. Then the kid died. Now, what's the machlok? We're not talking. In other words, I said there wasn't even a case of there was no brother, so it was not an issue. She could marry somebody else. She married somebody else, but we don't know whose kid it was. Now this kid grew up. He had a startup, and he made a few $1 million, and he died. Now the shaila is, who gets the money? Who gets the money? The grandfather, Reuben's father Yaakov, says it was his son's son. In other words, one who died, he impregnated his wife before he died. So he's the heir. Who inherits a son? If his son dies, Rahman's son, there's no children. The father, right? Goes up to the grandfather. So the grandfather says, money's his. The new husband says, no, the money is his because the kid is his kid. They didn't have DNA testing, so they didn't know whose kid it is. So what do? You can never resolve that issue. If you didn't have DNA testing, you can't resolve it. Then you say split it, because the situation is it's something that can't be resolved. It's a suffix that we don't know what's going to happen. So there he says in a case like that, the kaimlan cholkim mishum de'ein yadua, we don't know if it's a ben test of rishon, the grandfather, or ben zayin la'achron, ubno shel yavam, or it's the son of the yavam. The yavam could either be the brother who married her, probably shouldn't have married her, or it could be even somebody else's son. It could be if he married a friend. It doesn't make any difference. The point is, there can be questions that can't be resolved. Now we're going to talk about those cases. So there you say, even though Sumchas holds someone of Savik Holkin in there because you can't resolve it, but in case of our case, where it's not a question that can't be resolved, the question is, what was the intention over here? We know what happened. The seller sold the buyer either seeds or he sold them an animal, and the seller says, I sold it to you for food or for shchita, and he says, no, I sold it for investment, for plowing or for planting. So in a case like that, it's not like there's something that can't be resolved because we don't know. Question is, what was their intention? Do you look at do you give the moker the advantage because you say, listen, there was you didn't say anything about it, and therefore you go bust a robe, or do you say like Shmuel, no, you don't go bust a robe. The buyer's intent to say that wasn't my intention. So now we have this machlokas between Rav and Shmuel. Do you say by mama you go bust a robe or not? Rav says you go bust a robe. Shmuel says ain't no robe. We're at the 2 dots now, and I'm at base, about 6-7 lines down. Baseway, a woman. We're running around Shas now, right? You're wearing Ksubas, right? This is more from Ksubas. A woman was widowed or divorced, and the question was, she lost her Ksuba. She lost her ksuba. She claims when she got married, she was a virgin, a psula. Therefore, she's entitled to how much? $200, right? If she was an almana, she only gets 100. And she doesn't have her ksuba either because it was lost or stolen, or it's in a place where they don't write a ksuba. You're afraid of double jeopardy. If she'll collect twice, whatever. So she says, he omeres basul. She says, I got married, I was a psul, and I'm entitled to 200. Who omer, and the husband or the yorshim, whoever they are over here, the divorcee says, Loki almana, I married you, you're an almana, and you're only entitled to 100. So how do you resolve that? If they're Adam who remember the wedding, and they say she went out like in a litter. A hinuma is either a litter that they take virgins to psulas in a marriage, or it's the way she was. Her hair was uncovered in a certain way. In other words, there was evidence that the wedding was a wedding of a psula. If there's Adam like that, she had uncovered hair like that was the minhag of the thing. The hinuma was either he says kosa misnamnebe. It could either be like a litter, or it could be something that she carried, some sort of a basket, whatever. Doesn't make any difference. The point is that there's evidence. People remember that it was a psula, that the wedding was out of a psula. Since she gets 200, Subasa Messiah. Oh, okay, that's what the Gemara says. Now we're at the time of the Adam. It's only what? She only gets the 200 if there's Adam. Like Adam, if there's no Adam that her wedding was that of a virgin, she doesn't get the 200. Why don't you look at both Russian? Again, in those days, Rov Nashim, Basulas. In those days, most women were psulas when they got married. So why don't you go Basarov? According to Rob, you go Basarov. She says, I was a virgin. He says, you weren't a virgin. Okay, we don't know. How do you resolve it? If there's Adam who say we remember it was a virgin wedding, okay, so she gets the 200. If there's no Adam, she doesn't get the 200. Why? Why don't you look at Rov? Rov of the women then got married, they were psulas. So, and there's a kash on Rav. If you go Basarov, why don't you go Basarov there too? Rabina, because I'll tell you why. The robe there isn't so good. Why? Yes, most women get married when they are psulas. And a minority of the women are widows. This is psula. Whoever gets married as a psula, yesh lakol. There's a rumor. It's known. It's a virgin. Everybody knows it. There's no coal about her. It wasn't known that she got married as a virgin. It's laruba. Her robe is impaired. Therefore, you don't go basarov. Notice Rav says, yes, you normally go basarov, but here her robe is impaired. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. Wait a second. Psulas yesh lakol. If all the women who got married have a coal that they got married, all women who got married as psulas, there's a coal that they're married as psula. So ki'ik Adam, I have it. What happens if Adam said, we remember it was a virgin wedding? We remember it was a virgin wedding. And there's no coal. Middle they call. Since there's no coal, Sadi Shakrin, they're liars. What does it help to? He said if there's Adam that it was a virgin wedding, then then she gets the 200. Wait a minute, but if you say all women who got married as psulas, there's a rumor about it. It's known. It's not rumored. In other words, news is spread that she was a virgin. So since there's no coal over here, they're liars. He says no. Ella Rovan is psulas yeshakol. Most of the women who get married psulas yeshakol, the Zeus is whole vein lakol. It's ruba. Therefore, her robe is impaired because there's no coal about here. In other words, Rob's saying yes. Normally go bust a robe. And Rove would tell you that most women who get married are psulas, and therefore she's entitled to 200. But over here, there's another problem. Since most women who get married as a psulas have a coal, and this one doesn't have a coal, so her robe is impaired, and therefore it's not a proper robe. So that's how Rav answers it. So that was a kasha on Rav. Rav says you go bust a robe even when it comes to money. Why not here? Okay, this is a special case because the robe is impaired. Tashma, 4 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. Tashma hamocher eved lechavero, right? And Rashbam said Israel Ruba. Right, I just want to point out, Rashbam says 4 lines from the bottom in the Rashbam. Rashbam says there 5 lines. So it ruins it. It takes away that the power of that of the robe. So you could say we don't know, was she a psula and gets 200, was she an amon and gets 100? That's the point of Shmuel. When it comes to money, we don't say go basaro, but rather we have the old standard thing. The old standard rule when it comes to money, that's what we say over here. Tashma, back in the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom page. He sold an Evet Kanani. Reuben sold an Evet Kanani to Shimon. It turns out that when Reuben sold the Evet, he was already a crook, a ganav who stole money, or Kabusis, he was a kidnapper. He was a kidnapper. You know what? He tough luck. He sold him an Evet. What did you think you're getting at Tzaddik over here? Shlomo Zalman, sold him an Evet Kanani. What do you expect? So too bad. That deals it. Now, list him if the man was already, if the Evet was already condemned to death because he was listed Mizui and he was a murderer and he was going to eventually be caught and killed by the government, or he was already sentenced to death, Muchtav L'Machos, he was already sentenced to death, then Omelo, the buyer can say to the seller, take him back. This isn't worth anything. You sold me a dead man. A dead man is worthless, right? So it's like you sold a shore that was condemned to death. It's also by no. You can't sell it, then it's not worth anything. Now, Reisha, but in the first part of the Mishnah, if he wasn't condemned to death, he was just an Evet Kanani. I sold him Evet Kanani. Okay, looks like a strong Evet Kanani. But then after he bought him, he turned out that he was already a ganef or a kidnapper, a worse kind of a ganef. He says over there, tough luck. I sold it. What did you think you're going to have it over here? So Reisha, my time, but what's the reason why we say in the Reisha that what? That it's a good sale. And the buyer can't say anything. Because most of the slaves are that way. Most of them are crooks, right? I don't want to say anything about Arabs, but most of them are crooks. Most of them will steal, and they're kidnappers. So you go bust a road, and too bad. Over here, you don't say that the buyer could say, well, I wanted him for work, and I didn't want this guy who's going to be running around stealing. Can't say that, too bad. It's mashma like Rav, it's against Shmuel. This is my time, and therefore it's a kasha on Shmuel. It says Rashbam, Reisha might, from the top of the page, Reisha my time, isn't that's the greatest blemish you could have? Not that he's missing a foot, but he's a gana for his she didn't, the buyer didn't accept. I don't want a slave who's a crook. Mishum deruba avdin and Rashbam goes on. Avdi hachi isnu ganavim ukabis Muslim udas ken kano alokech ukamisha kibul. It's as if he accepted it because he figures most of them are that way anyway. Alma but mamona as lina basaro ruba b'kash l'shmuel tzakash Shmuel. The kivlo is basaruba according to Shmuel who doesn't go basaro, so it's like 50-50. Why do you say that the buyer has to accept it? He didn't know. Lokech did not know that he had this blemish that he's a crook. Vestam Lokech, Rav Shapiro, he wanted a good slave. Come on, when you put your money down, you want something good. Since the buyer did not know that the Evet Kanani was a crook, it should be betel mekach. Should be according to Shmuel. Should be mekach. You don't go basarov and say roast him that way. So it's a kasha on Shmuel because here you see you do go basarov like Rav. The Gemara says low. Not that most avodim are crooks. They're all crooks. They're all crooks. If they're all crooks, then he knew it. That's not like you go basarov, he doesn't go basarov. Here, they're all crooks. All Evet Kananim. What did you expect? Evet Kanani, Estam Evet Kanani is a crook. Therefore, even Shmuel would be mowed in this case, right? Most of Kulu Hachi Isnu, Ganavim. Command It's as if the seller told them, I'm selling you an Evet. An Evet equals a crook. They're all crooks. So therefore, it's not a kasha on Shmuel. Tashma, another case. Here's another case where we say we don't know what the circumstances were, like the kid who was born from either the Yavam or from another person that the widow married, right? The widow married, kid was born. We don't know whose kid it is. So when he dies and left the Yerusha, we don't know if it's belonging to the grandfather, it's belonging to the new husband. Here too, we have this famous case. We had this case before, but become a shore, an ox gored a pregnant cow, gored a cow, and you find the baby dead next to the cow. You find the baby there. What's our issue? It's not known. Did the ox that gored, what's the halach of a shore who's a tom pays 50%? Chatzinez, we had right? Chatzinez, he pays a shore that gored the first 3 times pays Chatzinez, he pays half. So here the shore killed the parah, killed the cow, was pregnant. You find the baby next to the cow. Did the shore gore the mother with when the baby was in there too? And therefore he should have to pay half. The owner of the shore should pay half of the value of the cow plus half of the value of the baby. Oh, imishinagcha yolda. So did she give birth before? Yolda. Did she give birth before? She the mother, the cow miscarried before. Therefore, it's not the responsibility of the goring ox. Baby was miscarried before. Oh, imishinagcha yolda. Or she gave birth after it was gored. In other words, he caused the goring ox caused not only the mother to die, but also caused the baby to die. So what's the halacha there? It says Misham Chatzi Nezek Lepara, he pays half the Nezek of the Para. Why? Because a short time pays Chatzi Nezek. The reveal of Vlad pays only a quarter of the Vlad. Why? Because if he would definitely be responsible, he'd pay for half of the Vlad. But we don't know. So you split it. We don't know. We don't know who the goring ox killed the baby or the baby died before. The Amai, Le Malachacha Rov Paras. If you go Basarov, most cows, Rov Paras, Masabas Violas, most cows who are pregnant, they give birth normally, and the baby's a normal living baby. But over here, so if you go Basarov, the baby was born normally. And therefore, Rov tells you the baby was normally, and since this baby was killed, died, must be that the ox gored her. Go Basarov, and then for the ox should have to pay, the owner of the ox should have to pay half of the value of the baby also, not just a quarter. Quarters, because we don't know, so you say you split it. What do you mean? Go Basarov. Rov, most cows give birth normally, and the baby is alive. In this case, since the baby was dead, obviously the baby died because of the goring of the ox. The answer is, so why don't you say Vachas Megicha? The answer is Hasam Mishum Safgalon. It's not that simple. We have another suffix. Diklamemer Makama Asa, maybe. We don't know. Yes, the goring ox definitely had a hand in killing the baby. You're right. According to this is a kash on Rav. Rav says you go Basarov. You go Basarov. Why don't you say that the animal, the baby was killed by the ox? Because if you go Basarov, the baby would have lived. So if the baby was alive, since the baby was dead, it must have been killed by the ox. Yes, that's true. You go Basarov. The baby was killed by the ox, but there's two ways to kill. Could have killed directly, right? Goring, and that caused it. Then he'd have to pay half. Or it could be that he just scared the animal. He scared it, and the mother lost the baby due to fright. He says that's the suffix of it. Could be that the cow who was pregnant saw the ox coming towards her to gore her, and she was frightened, and she miscarried because of fright. And then, so you say, but the goring ox really caused her to death. Yes, but it's considered indirect. It's a grumma. Didn't it physically touch him, right? If somebody scared somebody else with a gun, and the guy had a heart attack and died, God will get him for it, but he didn't really kill him, right? That's what happened over here. We could say or the animal came from behind, right? The animal came from behind. In other words, the cow didn't see the goring ox. So the goring ox actually gored the mother and killed the baby that way. So we don't know what happened. In this case, we don't know. What we see if we have a dead baby over here? We don't know. There's no way to determine. Even if one says, I know. Yeah, but we don't really know. There's no way for Bezin to determine what happened. Have a moment of a suffix, and a suffix like this where you can't determine what took place. Rashbam says over here also in the first of the wide lines on Sadiq Imam Alaf and Rashbam, right? Here he says even Sumkus says because we can't determine it. But in Shmuel's case, where it's not a question we can't determine what happened. He sold him the seed, he sold him the ox. The question is, did he sell him for food or not? So you say Moshe Mechmel Raya. Sure, low knowledge suffix for Maisa. Rashbam says in the first of the wide lines of Rashbam. There's no suffix in what happened over here, like we don't sure he sold it to him stam. It's only moment suffix el chenolet suffix b'davar she'en yadua heichayim Maisa. So when Sumka says mamanam of the salkas, we don't know what happened over here. Just like we don't know what happened. In the case of the son of the deceased father who died with apparently no children, and then the Yavam married her, or she married somebody else, whatever, if there was no Yavam, and now the question is, the child died and left the Yerusha, does it go to the grandfather, does it go to the father, to her second husband? We don't know what happened. There's no way to determine it. We don't have DNA testing. In this case, too, you find the baby here next to the mother. We don't know, did the goring ox kill it? In that case, you have to pay for the baby. In this case, Chatzi Nezek, because the goring ox was a short time. Or did it die from fright, possibly? And he's not responsible. So we don't know. There he said, Monosopik Kolkin. So again, back in the Gemara, some language tonight. Let's say the Machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Again, do you go Basar Mum? Do you say Einoch Maman Acharov, or like Rav, did you go Maman Acharov? Maybe it's a Machlokas tonight. I'm sure Shoyeroa. Let's say Shor was plowing, right? Or not plowing, was shepherding, was grazing in the field. You find another shore next to it dead. Now the question is, did the shore that's alive, that's grazing. You know, they were fighting over some grass or whatever, and maybe they're unsure, kill the other one. Even though the ox that died was gored to death, and the other one, and the surviving ox is known to be a gorer, right? That's known to be a gorer, so it's obviously there's raglayim l'davar. There's you know, it's likely that this ox killed the other one. There's nobody else here. You know, it's like, you know, a guy's got a bloody knife and there's nobody else around, and he comes in a second, the other guy's dying there. He says, "Who killed him?" What? There was an accident. No, wait, no. He says, "No, somebody else killed him." You know, like, who else was there? Here there was two oxen. One apparently killed the other. One was gored, and one looked like he is a gore, and one was a gore. You don't say, or Zem Menushach, this one was bitten to death. But Zem Moilish, this normally bites of them. Ain't omen. We don't say be a duish zen. Like, we don't say we know for sure that this ox gored the other one, or this ox bit the other one. We don't say that because you don't have any witnesses, right? Ravacha says, when a camel was trying to mate another animal. Now, when they mate, they get very wild. They get very wild and pushy. And maybe he was fighting over a female camel, whatever, and they found another camel dead next to this camel. Well, the camel number one was trying to mate, and they found camel number two dead. You know that he killed him, right? Because this was known. He was known to be it was a chazaka that when he's trying to mate, he can get very wild. Okay, so we have this machlokas. Sabrua, we assume Duruba b'chazaka ki adarin. Rove, here there's no rove, but there's a chazaka. In case the chazaka, the shore, in the first case, the shore is a chazaka that he's a gorer. In the second case, the gamal is a chazaka that when he mates, he's wild and he can kill and kill another animal. So we assume they had the same power. Lema Rav Damar Ravacha. Rav says he go basarov. Says he also go basar chazaka. He goes like Ravacha. Obviously, this camel that while he's mating, he's a chazaka that he's going to hurt other animals, and therefore he was the one who killed this dead camel. Shmuel Damar Kantana. Shmuel goes like Tanakamana. We don't go basarov. You don't go basar chazaka that he probably did it because he has a chazaka that he's a gore. We assume that just like Rav Shmuel says Enoch Mamachro, Enoch Chazaka Charo. The Gemara says, no, that's no proof at all. This is not the same machlokas. Machlokas Rav and Shmuel is you go basarov or not. But over here, this is a question of a chazaka. So like Rav Damar Karavachu, Shmuel Damar Katanakama. Rav will say, I know Damar Yafilu Tanakama. I can even go like the Kamkam. Rav who says I go basarov. I can even go like the Tanakama who says you don't assume that the goring ox killed the other ox. Adkam Lakamar Tanakama some Eladol Azin and basar chazaka. Says you don't go basar chazaka. I will basar baslina. When it comes to rov, I would go basar rov. He just says you don't go basar chazaka. The fact that this ox is a gorer, doesn't tell you that he definitely killed the other one, right? It's only a chazaka. It's not a rov. What's a chazaka? Chazaka is a presumption, right? It's a legal presumption that that this is what he is, but that doesn't mean that there's a rov. Like Racha who says, then the case of the camel, we do assume that the camel that was mating was the animal that killed. There you go, basar chazaka. This camel itself is a muhsik. This camel itself is a muhsik because we know that he's going to gore when he mates. Avo basaruba lo asliam. Rove tells you not this guy. Rove tells you most people, most animals, right? Most animals give birth, carry to term and give birth normally. Most people buy oxen for plowing. That's most, not this one. Here we're telling you this one. So Shmuel could say, even though I don't go basar rove, but over here, this camel itself is a muhsik. He himself is a muhsik. Not you have to look. Rove tells you what are most animals in the world. This one tells you this himself, and this one himself is definitely that with basar ruba lo asina. So again, Rav and Shmuel both maintain their shitas. Rav says Enoch Mamach Rov. Rav says rather Hoch Mamach Rov. And the concept of rov applies not only by Isser, but applies by Mammon as well. And Shmuel says, Enoch Mammon Acharov. We pass like Shmuel. What about our Mishnah? Our Mishnah, we said, apparently goes like Shmuel, and we'll see that tomorrow from the next case. We're up to 4 lines from the bottom of the page on Tzaddik Gimel, and I'll pick it up from there tomorrow, where we're going to try to bring a proof from our Mishnah. Our Mishnah is a chara proof to Shmuel. The Gemara is going to say in a Chanami. It is a proof. Our Mishnah goes like Shmuel that we pass like, but there's another Tana that Rav goes like, who says that Hochim Mammon Acharov. All right, we'll pick them here tomorrow. Have a good day.
Yeah, thanks.